Welcome back, everyone, to the Fantasy Network. I'm, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and we're starting our journey together, I hope, to the Dark Tower with Roland the Gunslinger chasing the Man in Black. 2021's the year I decided to just randomly dive into the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, and I kind of want to go over why I've decided to randomly do this, on top of the fact that I'll be also reviewing book 1 and 2 here with no spoilers, but I do think it's important to couple these reviews together because a lot of people get the wrong impression from book 1. And I'll get into those reasons a bit later, but let's talk about why I'm reading The Dark Tower out of essentially nowhere. Now, full transparency, at this point, I'm actually done with book 4 and the novella that follows book 4, and I'm going to be starting book 5 in probably the next week, I think so. So I've been a little bit behind on these reviews, and the reason why is just because Dark Tower is very hard to describe. It is so many things all at once while still being at its core Stephen King doing Stephen King type things. So it's taken me a while to get my notes together, collect my thoughts, and really come at this from a different angle. This is easily a series you could review each book because they all feel so different even though they're linked. But I've decided to kind of couple the books together because they kind of lend themselves to that. And book 1 is just something where I don't know if a lot of people will read it and want to continue the series and they think that that is what defines the series, and I think in some ways it might be, but it's just totally different than book 2, 3, 4, and 4.5 so far. So I think it'll do it good justice if I couple it with 2 and explain where this series kind of goes once you're out of this weird Western fever dream. But to the question of why am I reading Dark Tower in 2021, and there's really 3 reasons. Well, first, let me just say, my parents actually bought me the first 2 books for Christmas, so that was definitely a bit of a kind of push in that direction. But among that, the very first reason is just that I love Stephen King. I love the weirdness that comes with King, and I've always heard that Dark Tower is him being his absolute weirdest. So I'm down for that challenge, and I'm up to see what's going on in King's crazy head, and I haven't been disappointed thus far. Reason number 2 is the fact that I think this is like one of the most polarizing fantasy series of all time. I think a lot of people think that this is a terrible series because of decisions King has made in later and towards the end of the series, which I don't know any of those yet because I haven't got that far, but a lot of people seem to check out around the point where I'm at now. So it'll be interesting to see what my reaction is, but it's just polarizing. I've literally seen about equal amount of people say this is the worst series ever, don't waste your time, and people say this is the best series I've ever read. So whenever something has that polarizing of opinions, I like to kind of ignore everything, box out. I haven't been spoiled for anything really, other than maybe one minor thing towards the end of the series, but for me, when something's this polarizing, is by an author that I love, I want to formulate my own opinions. I have pretty much avoided everyone else's thoughts on the ending as far as like other reviewers, and that's very on purpose because I want to formulate, my own thoughts and my opinions so I can share with you, and then maybe see if I can get other people to join me on the Dark Tower if I end up loving it all the way to the end. And reason number 3 is quite simply, I've been really enjoying, diving through all these amazing fantasy series, but I was looking for something a little bit different, and as I worked my way through Realm of the Elderlings, I just wanted something to kind of do on the side, and I've decided to do Dark Tower almost primarily in audiobook fashion, and I have to say, I think this is one of my favorite audio narrations ever that I've ever had. It's very easy to listen to. I shouldn't say read. It is easy to read as well, but I think the narration lends itself to the series well, and the narrator, I can't remember his name for the first 4 books, does a stupendous job of different voices and all types of things. Those are the main 3 reasons, right? I love King. It's polarizing and popular, so I kind of want to get my own take. And then 3, I was just ready for something weird. I was just ready for something different and to kind of supplement my Realm of the Elderlings journey. And here we are. So to get into book 1, The Gunslinger, probably the most infamous of all the books because so many people have picked it up and put it down. And I have to tell you, in 2016, I picked this book up because I was trying to get back into reading in 2016. And people said, oh, you should check, like you like Stephen King, you want fantasy, you should check out The Dark Tower. I read The Gunslinger, was like immensely confused and overwhelmed and didn't really like it at all in 2016. I did finish it, and I think I read the first chapter of Drawing of the Three and then just kind of did something else. I wasn't reading at the time, so it was probably not the best choice to jump back into reading with The Gunslinger. Which is so funny because I think I ranked it like a 2 stars whenever I put it on my Goodreads back then. I have to take a look. But rereading it after my parents had bought me book 1 and 2, I had a really old copy, so now I got this fresh copy, beautiful cover. I jumped in, and I have to tell you, my opinion has completely flipped on The Gunslinger as a first book in this series. First off, I just want to say the foreword in The Gunslinger is probably the best foreword I've ever read in a book. For some reason, when King talks to the reader, it feels like he's being super authentic, and you're really getting a kind of a peek inside that man's brain, which is just, it's a wild place to be. And I absolutely love the foreword of this book, and I read everything that King writes in a foreword now just because of it. And I want to get this out very quickly for people who are watching this. If you read The Gunslinger and you said, that series is not for me, I implore you to continue to watch this review, because I promise you The Gunslinger is not really a representation of the Dark Tower. In some ways it is. It's King at his very best with scene setting, in my opinion. Dark Tower overall in these first few books for me, and specifically here at book 1 and 2, the scene setting is the best thing. I love the setting of the Dark Tower. It's something that inspires me for some reason, makes me want to write my own story, because I've always liked a kind of a world that's moved on approach. I like the fact that it feels post-apocalyptic and that society has really regressed, but there's still signs that there was advancement in this world beforehand, and I just love that entire premise. It's good scene setting here in book 1, but man, it just changes tone so much to book 2. But I still think that book 1's actually really cool, and it's written very differently than all the other Stephen King books, and he himself says it was pretty pretentious. He was 17 years old when he wrote this. He had just came out of a writing workshop. I actually love the writing here on my second attempt of reading it, and you know what? Maybe that makes me pretentious, and I'm okay with that. I dropped this line before, and I actually really think it holds true. It's like a weird Western fever dream that also sets up a epic fantasy. And if that sounds really odd to you, it's because it is. And we're following Roland, the gunslinger, chasing the man in black, as basic storytelling gets right there, right? But it's not as simple as that really when you start to see the things that Roland does. And from the very get-go in this book 1, I'm questioning whether our protagonist is really a good guy at all. Because some of the things that Roland ends up saying, doing, or whatever, kind of makes me question immediately his motivations and his moral compass. Gunslingers seem to be a pretty high standard. Everyone seems to know what a gunslinger is in this world here in book 1, and I'm not sure if he's abusing his power or not, because we know so little about the world. There's a scene with a church that I think is literally one of King's best scenes that I've read in any of his books, and I wonder if anyone else feels that way. I know a lot of people are lukewarm on this book 1, but man, that church scene was absolutely stupendous. And again, it had me questioning the whole time of whether we're following really a good guy or not. And this book is not very long. So, you kind of follow the beats, and there's a lot of weirdness to it, and you meet a character named Jake that I think is just excellent. Stephen King is so good at writing kids. And it's for someone like me who is not always into kids' characters, Stephen King writes some of the best, if not the best, kid characters for me personally. And for everyone that says, King is terrible at writing endings to books, well, I think The Gunslinger has a great ending, to be honest with you. Especially after you read on into the series and you think back to these moments in this book. The ending of The Gunslinger, in my opinion, is awesome. And I don't know if it could have went over any better for me. So that was a huge point for me rereading this time. It's just the tone, the writing, the scene setting, everything. This book is very atmospheric, and without giving away spoilers, I can't say too much other than kind of just accept the fact that it's going to be weird. Maybe some things don't even make sense, but I do think that the ending is really solid and made me want to jump into book 2, which is funny because in 2016 I was struggling to flip into Drawing of the Three. And like I said, I only read one chapter. Total reversal here in 2021. I loved book 1, The Gunslinger, which leads right into Drawing of the Three. And again, I'll keep this no spoilers, but I didn't have any idea really what to expect out of book 2 because of the way book 1 ended. I know Drawing of the Three, it sounds, I don't know, it's kind of mysterious in its own right. What does that really mean? It becomes very apparent pretty quickly, but the opening of Drawing of the Three just gets even more bizarre, and that is the theme for Drawing of the Three, and maybe Dark Tower as a whole, is whenever it gets weird, just know it's going to get a lot weirder. And that is my advice. Get through Gunslinger, and then I want you to take every single expectation that you hold for Dark Tower and throw it out the window. And do not forget the face of your father. Sorry, it's just a line that's repeated 1,000 times in the book, and I just continuously say it throughout the day now, just randomly, to my friends, hey, don't forget the face of your father. My friends think I'm very weird. And as you don't have any idea what to expect and you're rocking this roller coaster, the writing is so well thought out. It is so terrific. And it goes from being an epic Western fantasy type vibe, almost like a bounty hunter situation, to a portal urban fantasy here in book 2. And that's a very fine line to go, from one to the other. King writes it in a way that it feels somehow natural, even while being one of the most odd reading experiences I've ever had. And one of the reasons why that writing is so good is because he does a tremendous job here of defining the differences between the worlds and then therefore in the cultures between the characters that we meet here in book 2. And I think that with that, he brings some amazing humor that just had me cackling and dying laughing while also being in just a very bizarre situation. And we do get to meet some new characters here, and they're King's doing his king things, and they're unique, we'll say that. And they're well-realized characters, and they're wild. They're just really wild. But even some of the characters who only are a role player and a little side character in a scene, they have like indirect characterizations about them that adds so much depth to the story and to the scene in itself, where I'm able to immediately recognize that little side character, little role player in a scene as somebody. And I think that adds a lot of depth to the story without wasting any page time with the indirect characterization. King is so good at setting the scenes, and I think he's at full display here in Dark Tower and with every single thing he does with our main cast and the side cast. And our main cast and side cast, right? They all have to communicate, and there's people kind of jumping into different, we'll call it worlds, I guess. The miscommunication that comes because people are from different places adds a whole lot of nuance to the story, and also is pretty hilarious at some points. And as you go on and you get deeper and deeper and towards the Dark Tower here in book 2, and you're introduced to all these new characters, I do want to say that it's totally different from book 1. Like, if book 1 wasn't your flavor, this could be, right? It's just so much different. But there's like a little bit of residue of like the tone. There's just a little bit of residue from the Gunslinger here that I like, because while it feels completely different, and Gunslinger is the redheaded stepchild of the series, clearly, if you look at any of the reviews, I like the fact that I can, by the faintest strand, be like, oh, this is connected back to the first book. And while I was reading book 2, and again, I'm already further along in the series, the one thing I did want from Drawing of the 3, it's like taking a very long time to get introduced to these characters, which is totally fine because some of the best backstories ever, but I'm wondering how things are going to be fleshed out, and some of the relationships that are stemming from this book, I think there needs to be a little bit more time given to that, and I hope that it just gets a little more fleshed out in the end. Specifically, kind of like romantic interest and things like that, and I'll leave it at that. Kind of felt weird, and not in like the good weird that I've been talking about, but like maybe a possible missed opportunity to make it feel more worth it or realistic. And I gotta tell you something, if you're into 80s nostalgia, specifically Terminator, you need to read this book. If you're into 80s pop culture and stuff like that, King's always done a very good job, and I think to almost a detriment that he is so we'll call it Western in his writing, and he relates a lot of things to American pop culture. That is very strong here. And with the 80s, and like I said, Terminator, it was so fun to watch him basically get to write his own 80s movie action scene, and it is really, really cool. If you're into that, you're going to love it. And overall, Drawing of the 3 is not just a pivot point from the Gunslinger to launch us into a bizarre rabbit hole journey, but it's also introducing us to our main cast. I feel like pretty solid that we've met all the major players as far as like our group goes. And it's fleshing out all their origin stories, which King did a fantastic job of. But also continuing to talk about destiny, which in this series is called Ka, and really getting you to start thinking about that and what it means for our characters and who's in charge and also who's making the right decisions. Destiny is the main theme in this story, in my opinion, so far, and you get to dive into that a little bit more here. I mean, excellent characterization, amazing dialogue, great humor, some really creepy stuff too, but the tension, you could cut it with a knife. This book had everything, from action to introspection, a little bit of world building even. I think there's a lot of mystery when it comes to that. But I think book 2, Drawing the 3, is way more representative, especially since I've read on in the series now into book 4 and 4.5. is Drawing of the Three is a better representation of what the Dark Tower is. If you were to get to book 2 and you read book 2 and hated it, I feel like you could probably put it down, the whole series down at that point. But the Gunslinger is very much a very weird prologue to what is to come. But Drawing of the Three is one of the best books I've read this year for sure. I wouldn't give it the top spot because that's reserved for Royal Assassin, but I do think that Drawing of the Three, it's not surprising to me that people say after the whole series that Drawing of the Three was their favorite. I think it's probably in that 1 to 2 slot for me, 4 books in. But the book really felt like it had everything. And I'm really pleased. I've actually kept this relatively short, which is awesome. I was really worried, describing why I decided to read this and then getting into my book 1 and 2 reviews. I'm trying to keep this as snappy as possible. I'm going to be doing Dark Tower spoiler discussions. I haven't decided if I'm going to break them down by books or if I want to group books together or if I want to wait till the whole thing's done. I know Sarah Reeds is reading through the Dark Tower. Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative is reading through Dark Tower. And Man Carrying Thing right now is reading through the Dark Tower. He's actually a book ahead of me. There's a lot to talk about here. And I hate that I'm being so vague, but I have some spoiler thoughts that I will get into whenever I do one of those discussions. And definitely when this whole thing's over, I'm going to be doing like an overall spoiler thoughts video of just me kind of talking to the camera like this. But I implore you, if you haven't jumped into the Dark Tower and maybe you have some room in your TBR or you're looking for an audiobook, I think this is an amazing journey to start on if you're looking for something with some atmosphere, something with a tone, and one of the most unique experiences that epic fantasy has to offer from one of the greatest minds in all of fiction. Stephen King misses sometimes. Truthfully, he does. But when Stephen King hits, it's top tier. I mean, when the man's on, it's hard to beat him, at least for me, in my dollar. So Dark Tower is a huge hit. Dark Tower is a huge hit with me. I've been having so much fun, and somehow it really balances well with Realm of the Elderlings. It's just totally different, and they're both huge series, and I feel like Dark Tower really lends itself to somebody who's just trying to get lost. And I feel lost when I go in to Midworld and to the Dark Tower. So I hope that you will pick it up, and if you have already picked it up, let me know down in the comments what you thought of book 1 and 2 and how different they are. I mean, they're so much different. Please keep the spoilers out of the comments, even though I said I've read into book 3 and 4. Other people may not have, so just try to keep that limited down there. I'm excited to continue this journey. I hope some people maybe will join on with me now. I'll be reading book 5 probably in the month of June, listening to it, and hopefully wrapping up the series in June. Yeah, so I'll probably wrap up the series in July, so I'm almost done with it. And it's exciting times, and I'm really excited to be looking for the Man in Black. So thank you so much for spending your time here with me and listening to me ramble about this. I hope that you join me on my journey to the Dark Tower. And if you like this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe. You turn on the bell for notifications. I'm going to be covering Realm of the Elderlings, Dark Tower, a bunch of other Stephen King stuff, and then I'm going to be jumping into Red Rising, and then later down the line, Malazan. And I'm also going to be reading some Brian Lee Durfee books, which I'm really excited about. So I'd love to have you here in this community. It's a pretty tight-knit place, and I love talking to y'all. So until I see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.